This is the MA 503 Cape Cod and Islands Continuum of Care training for the new coordinated entry assessment for adults. We have officially retired the SPDAT line of assessments from our system, and the COC has adopted a version of the Matching for Appropriate Placement MAP assessment tool, one for adults aged 25 and older, and one for unaccompanied youth aged 18 through 24. Our goals are to provide a more accurate vulnerability assessment, to accommodate local preferences by customizing the assessment tools, and to make the data collection process more streamlined for staff who conduct assessments. All coordinated entry processes remain the same. Clients must still be entered into the CES project in HMIS, and all CES data elements must still be collected. The new assessments contain many of the same questions as the SPDATs, but there are some updated questions too. The new assessment format is noticeably different, but hopefully less cumbersome and more efficient. The adult assessment should be used for all heads of household who are age 25 and older. Head of household refers to single individuals as well as heads of families. When families are considered for placement through coordinated entry, only the head of household should be assessed. The top section of the adult assessment asks for general information about the client. It is important that you collect as much information as possible. Clients can refuse to provide complete answers, but they are still eligible for CES services. However, it is much easier to assess level of prioritization if you have a full data set for each person. The question regarding assessment type is especially important. This is a CES data element that must be collected and reported to HUD through the CES APR. So please be sure to enter this response in HMIS. Questions 1 through 5 refer to client health and well-being. 1 is yes or no, and 2 is multiple choice. Check the appropriate box. Questions 3, 4, and 5 are text boxes that should include number of days. Questions 6 through 10 pertain to frequency of specific occurrences. Only one response should be checked. Questions 11 through 17 also pertain to specific occurrences, but are limited to yes or no. The questions leave space to include number of times each has occurred within the past 6 months, but it's really the yes or no that's important here. Question 18 asks about human trafficking and is a yes or no question. Question 19 is intended to find out where the client usually sleeps as of the date of the assessment. The wording of the question is a bit ambiguous. We know that this population tend to move around from one sleeping arrangement to another from night to night. In this question, the person conducting the assessment should try to determine where the client sleeps most frequently right now. For example, a client who stays in emergency shelter most days during the winter may spend the warmer months outside. Try to gauge the response as it pertains to the current season. This question should have one answer only. Questions 20 and 21 check to see if the client meets the threshold for chronic homeless status. Question 20 may have as many disability responses as the client reports. Question 21 looks to see whether the client has acquired the length of time homeless necessary for chronic homeless status. You may answer both parts A and B of question 21, but only one positive response will be used for scoring purposes. Question 22 determines if the client meets the chronically homeless threshold, using responses from questions 20 and 21. If the client has a disability and has accumulated the requisite length of time, the client is awarded a point for meeting the threshold. As a side note, individuals must provide documentation of chronic homelessness when being offered housing vouchers. But for the purposes of the assessment, the COC uses the threshold determination as part of the referral process. Question 23 asks about domestic violence and is a yes or no question. If a person answers yes to fleeing domestic violence, he or she should be offered immediate services to ensure their safety. Referral to an independence house is always a good option. Question 24 asks about gender and should have one answer only. Question 25 examines housing history and may have as many responses as apply. Question 26 asks about veteran status and has a yes or no answer. The unscored questions at the bottom are included to determine if there are any particular living situations that the client does not want. Clients who refuse referral to a type of housing that is problematic for them do not lose priority or their spot on the by name list. It's hoped that having this information up front will prevent housing mismatches, which temporarily restrict voucher availability and take time to return. Having walked through the questions, we can now look at scoring the assessment. Way over on the right of the assessment is a column labeled Score. Depending on how the client answers the question, the box is checked or left unchecked. The column labeled Response tells you what answers earn a check mark. For example, a yes to question 1, are you aged 60 or older, earns a check mark. For multiple choice questions like number 2, the response column tells you which of the choices earn a check mark. In this case, a response of fair or poor would earn a check. Responses of excellent, very good, or good do not earn a check. Questions 3, 4, and 5 require a number answer. Any response that is greater than 14 days earns a check. A response of 14 or less does not earn a check. In questions 6 through 10, only one response per question should be included. A check mark is earned with answers of sometimes, fairly often, or very often. Questions 11 through 17 earn checks based on yes answers, but the assessment leaves room to include the number of times for each occurrence. Question 18 is yes or no and earns a check for a yes answer. Question 19 is multiple choice and is limited to one answer only. The option for scoring is 2 check marks for unsheltered outside, emergency shelter, or safe haven, and 1 check mark for transitional housing. Question 20 asks about disabilities with multiple responses possible. For scoring, 1 disability earns 1 check, and 2 or more disabilities earn 2 checks. Question 21 may have yes answers to both parts A and B, but only 1 check can be earned for the question. 1 yes answer and one no answer will still earn a check. But 2 no answers earn no checks. Question 22 determines if the client meets the threshold for chronic homelessness. If the individual earned at least 1 point for question 20 and 1 point for question 21, the client then earns a check mark on question 22 for meeting that threshold. Question 23 is a yes/no and earns a check for a response of yes. Question 24 is multiple choice and earns 1 check mark for any answer other than man/boy or woman/girl. Question 25 is multiple choice with as many answers as apply. This question should receive 1 check for 1 answer and 2 checks for 2 or more answers. Question 26 is yes or no and earns a check for yes. Scoring on the assessment paper is done manually. Count up all the check marks from the score column representing points, and that is the client's assessment score. If the person earned 14 or more checks or points, he or she qualifies as prioritized. If the total score is less than 14, the person is not prioritized. An index of questions and total possible points is found on the scoring page at the end of the assessment form. Possibly the biggest difference between the mechanics of the new MA 503 assessment and the VI SPDAT in HMIS is that the client's assessment score will not auto-calculate on the assessment screen when entered into HMIS for the new assessment. But total scores will be visible on the CES report in business objects. That subject will be addressed in another training. If you have questions, please contact me at martha.taylor@capecod.gov or at 508-375-6625. Thank you.